welcome to all members, to our guests and alternates and our speakers and so on. So it's lovely to see you all, and thank you for making it. Michelle has a list of apologies, but again, with 60 odd people potentially at the committee meeting, as usual, I won't ask Michelle to go through them, but you see that they're recorded in the minutes that you get. By one point, though, in the intro, if I could specifically make, is around the declarations of interest. So some declarations of interest forms have now been sent through. We have received some, but we haven't received all. So, Michelle, I think you're happy to take an action to send the form out again, just as a prompt for people, just in case. We all know what our inboxes are like. But if Michelle will send the form out again, please do return it as quickly as you can, because for those of you who have looked at the workbook, you will see that there is a page on declarations of interest in the workbook, and for the next meeting, that will be completed based on declarations of interest forms received, and none of us will want to be a blank on that. A blank in the sense of not having sent in a form, not having nothing to declare. So, Michelle, thank you in advance for doing that again. Much appreciated. I think that's probably all by way of introduction, Susanna. Unless you think I've missed anything, I'm going to whiz on to minutes.
No, only just to say that, and it's in the chat, but recognise that Fiona Ellis received honours in the New Year's honours list, but maybe a collective round of applause around that, because I think that made a lot of our New Year's to see that.
Well done, Fiona. Thank you for reminding us.
Richard's got his hand up.
Oh, has he? Richard, yes.
Well, that was meant to be a clap, so I'm clearly failing after 3 years. Sorry, Fiona. But I was with Fiona in the week, so I did give you a hug as well as a clap.
Ah, that's nice. That's good. Thanks, Richard. So moving on then to item number 2, the minutes of the last meeting, 9th of the 12th. There are only 6 pages, and thank you for those minutes, Michelle. Look good to me, but let's do them for accuracy first, please. I'm going to take them on block if I can. Has anybody got any issues of accuracy in the draft minutes as you have received? And I don't see anybody waving or any hands up. So on that basis, shall we resolve that the ICP today agreed the draft minutes of the 9th of December 2022 as a true and accurate record? Everybody content? Good. And then the other item is the ICB workbook to receive, but there is one item in there that I'd like us to focus on specifically, and that's the actions brought forward log. So that covers the matters arising which are not the 2 to follow. So we've got 2 specific matters arising to come up, the ICB board update and the COVID-19 evidence submission. But the other matters arising in the workbook, they are all noted to be complete or on track. Is everybody content that the record as presented as complete and on track is accurate? Any disagreements or discussions? No, we'll take that as agreed. And then is everybody content that the matters arising as presented today are a full and a true and accurate record of the matters arising from December? Or do you have any other matters arising you think we should have captured? And one hand up, and it's Sharon. Over to you, Sharon.
Apologies, Chair. It's not a matters arising, it's an accuracy of the minutes. I was actually present at the last meeting.
Oh, thank you, Sharon. Good spot. In which case, thank you for that. In which case, Michelle, could we do an amendment to update Sharon's presence at the meeting, and we'll, unless anybody is disagreeing, we'll accept that with that one amendment, we'll accept the minutes as a true and accurate record. Everybody okay with that? Good. And then matters arising, I'll go back to that. No others that people want to raise. Agreed as a true and accurate record. So then on to the two specific matters arising. I'm going to go next to Ed for the ICB board update. So all yours, Ed.
Thank you, and happy new year, everyone. And yes, congratulations, Fiona. That's richly deserved with your honour. So I think I updated on the board meeting on the 23rd of November, the last ICP. So I won't repeat that, but you've got the minutes as part of the papers to review that. So any questions on that, please let me know. On the 20th of December, we had an informal board development session hosted by West Suffolk Hospital. In part, the purpose of that was to look at the new hospital site, which is very exciting. As we know, there's a new hospital in progress that will be delivered, we hope, by 2030. And so it'd been quite wet weather leading up to that. So we had quite a comical situation where the ICB board were in their wellies and various footwear, navigating the wet leaves and the mud, and had a very good tour of the site. We're particularly interested in the Hardwick Manor, which is going to remain, which is the most exquisite building, and I'm sure a lot of people have got their eyes on that to be their office. But I think probably the solution will be using it as an amazing kind of wellbeing centre. So some incredible assets there. It was a really great tour. We also got to meet Dr. Ewan Cameron, who's the incoming chief executive, who joined us, which was very nice. But the main part of the development session alongside the tour was a seminar we had led by Roger Klein and Hartpit Hockley on equality, diversity and inclusion, which was really a very good conversation. I think people were very open in their views and very constructive. And we particularly learned a lot from the work that's happened at Essex County Council around Quest and Suffolk County Council through described by Sue Cook. So we're going to be working with both of those councils as an executive team in the ICB to think about how we can learn from them in terms of the internal approach within the organisation of the ICB, and then also think about how we through this committee, through this partnership, how we continue to promote the EDI agenda as a whole system. So I thought that was a very productive conversation. Will, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, thank you, Ed. That was a really good summary of a long and very interactive and actually at times quite intense session, but it was really valuable. And sorry if you said it and I missed it. Many apologies on that EDI update. It was a part 1, wasn't it? There's going to be a part 2 to come in February, I think.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any was that it, Ed? Do you have a bit of questions? Yeah. Any questions for Ed or indeed any others from colleagues? Yeah.
John Spence. Well, I don't know if you can see my hand.
John, yes. Good morning. Do come in. No, and I've got you now. Yeah.
Apologies for being late. I sent you a message just in the last few minutes about the issue. And I would just say the Questor thing within Essex has been revealing for me, very, very interesting and very educative, actually, as well as being good for our people in terms of EDI. I was just going to ask, Will, whether we have any issue in West Suffolk, as I do in Harlow, where funds have been allocated for a new hospital, but the design for that new hospital is sort of £200 million more than the funds that have been allocated. Have we got to the allocation of funds stage yet with West Suffolk, and do we think it will be enough?
No, it's never enough, is it? But I see Nicola's put a hand up. Nicola, would you like to respond to that? And Ed, if you want to respond as well, that's absolutely fine. But shall I go to Nicola first?
Yeah, I was happy for Ed to respond if he wanted to, but I can certainly give an update from my perspective as well. So John, in response to your question, it's a really good question, and it is a challenge that we have experienced within the Future System programme at West Suffolk. The Future System programme is our overarching programme which will deliver a new hospital, but also deliver a health and social care system around it locally within the Alliance that will enable the new hospital to function. And that's a really important point, because when the planning was done, when the original planning was done in terms of the numbers and looking at capacity, if we sort of just assumed the amount of growth that we have seen up till now and projected that forward, then I think we would have needed a hospital with about 800 beds, and then very quickly you run out of space again. So we've worked really closely with the National New Hospital Programme team to work through some of those issues. And our conclusion that we've come to locally through a lot of the co-production that's happened as well with the local community is that actually we need to design a hospital that's properly fit for the future. And what that means is that it can't just rely on the ever-expanding number of acute hospital beds. There has to be a move to a more sustainable system, so moving care out into the community where that is safe to do so, and investing and developing our community services so that people can receive their care in that place closer to their own home rather than in the hospital. And the premise is that the hospital will only do what an acute hospital absolutely has to do and can't be provided elsewhere. So therefore, there was, I think a couple of years ago, a reduction in the number of beds that we are requesting as part of that plan. So I hope that addresses your issue.
It's very helpful, thank you. And there may be a message there for West Essex. Okay.
Thanks very much, John. Thank you, Nicola. Ed, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it just on a sort of factual basis. So we haven't yet received the allocation. We're expecting it kind of every month, it seems. Mm-hmm. We can't really answer John's question perfectly until we've got that information.
Yeah, indeed, that's factually correct, isn't it? Yeah, Ruth.
Yeah, apologies for meddling, and I'm aware that this is. There's lots of people looking at this. And we had a conversation yesterday with Helena Joplin that came to the West PCNCDs, which was really interesting about the population health management and how that would fit in the future systems. She did talk very reassuringly about the impact on other areas of health and social care provision with those changes to the hospital. Just one small thing that came up was the size of the A&E. And I know you've looked at working with other people nationally, but are you the numbers didn't seem to match with the numbers I've seen in the development of the UTC in Ipswich. And I just wondered if there was that growth, has that been within the ICS, has that been cross-checked and matched, and whether that would be a useful thing to do?
So what I'll do here, if I may, thank you, Ruth, for that. Nicola's hand is up, so I'll go to Nicola, and then I'll go to Ed, if I may, for a comment. And perhaps could I just suggest, based on Ruth's intervention there, Mark Shenton. Mark, I know you had an AOB item that you were going to raise. Might this be an appropriate point to make that suggestion? If not, just say not when I come to you. But if this is a good moment to introduce your AOB point, perhaps I'll leave it to you. So let me go to Nicola first.
Sorry, I'm really happy for Ed or someone else to come back on this as well. But absolutely, we've linked across with colleagues in SNF and the wider system, Ruth. But I will take that away as well and just check in with Helena just to make sure that we have got those assumptions right.
Okay, thank you. And then Ed, anything to add there?
No, that's a good question to double check.
Okay, thank you. And then let me see if Mark, do you want to come in?
It's probably an appropriate time as any, Will. And it's a reflection from the chairs group that was held on Tuesday. And there was an item that we discussed around the current situation of the stress in the emergency and urgent care element of our system. And there was a recognition that in times of great stress, we usually go inward as organisations rather than go wide. And I think there's been a huge amount of internal NHS social care stuff being going on, led by the ICB and the alliances. But it may be that the chairs recognise that for future seasonal plans, maybe we could go much wider than that with the benefits that we have as from wide perspectives that are around this ICP table that are beyond the NHS and social care. And we've recognised that workforce capacity has at times been overwhelmed, and that we know has an effect on people's resilience to continue, and operational relationships become very tense as well. And those relationships we know are very key for us in our ICS. And we wondered whether if we played to our strengths, namely the principles that we have here and the culture that we have at this particular level within our ICS, and the inclusive strategies that we have, the declared priorities, as well as the learning that we've had from COVID, we wondered whether the ICP would welcome and support a wide event to strengthen our future preparations, both from a prevention element all the way through to operational capacity, and doing that together as an ICP and with our population. Now, whether that's related to how the hospitals of the future will work, quite likely, but it's an offer that the chairs group were willing to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And I saw a number of nods around the table for, shall I just call it an ICP summit for the moment in code terms, for whatever the right title turns out to be. Nicola, does that work from your point of view? Does it sound advantageous?
Yeah, absolutely. Completely support that.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ruth?
Yeah, just to come back on one of Mark's points about tensions, there was also, just for balance, there was some fantastic working together. So I just wanted to make sure that was the other side.
Oh yes, that's absolutely right, Ruth, and good point, well made, and we all will log that we all agree with that as well. Let me then go to Susanna and then Ed. So Susanna.
So just reflecting a really important point on this idea that Councillor Spence was really keen to underline to me yesterday, is that in approaching this particular piece of work, we must make sure that we really include data in this, and data in the right way, so that we really have one version of the truth. So we look to kind of build that into the way that we approach it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good point. Well made. And Ed?
Yeah, so just as I'm very, very supportive, I think we all agree that we need to be planning for next winter now. So the kind of earlier we have these conversations, the better. And I think there's been understandably a swing into how we deal with urgent demand, and a swing away from thinking about prevention because of the crisis we've been in. So I think if we can rebalance that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Ed. And John?
Yeah, I'm not being picky, Will, I promise, but you can have data. Having high quality management information will be better. And I hope we can build up a system that we can see whole system matrices for how it works from soup to nuts, really, from the moment somebody starts feeling ill to the moment they end up in their final destination. It is absolutely right what Ed says. The money that the government announced this week is further money being used to solve a problem, which I'm not sure quite exists in the way that government thinks. Having met with ministers this week, I don't think they understand it properly, actually. But it's money that would have been much better placed in the world of helping people to have healthier lives and prevent them entering the system in the first place.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, good point, John. Well made. And I think we'd all agree as well. I don't think you are being picky about your data point. The data is important. The numbers are important, clearly. But actually, it's the responsibility of us all, is it not, to turn that data into information so that we use that and then use that information, which is essentially what you're saying there. Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, thanks. I raised this at an Alliance tactical cell yesterday, but the VCS Emergency Partnership are working with NHS improvement around developing a framework for how the VCSE might support the NHS at times of emergency. And already we're seeing hospitals being supported by the voluntary sector. I'm conscious there's some comments in the chat, and I was going to add mine and then realised that it's not accessible to everybody. So just supporting and saying I'm sure the VCSE would be very much behind the way forward to have some sort of summit.
Thank you, Chris. So what I'm going to do then is suggest, Mark, that the ICP today is very strongly supportive of the suggestion you've made from the chairs group, for which many thanks, and that we think this should be taken forward in an appropriate way. But of course, there's a lot of detailed planning to do to figure out what that appropriate way is. Who is going to pick up the action here? Susanna, is that you? Is that inevitable?
So there was some detail about, in terms of organising and coordinating an event, certainly, but I will need some colleagues to help with shaping the kind of content for that and so on. So I would be grateful. Some of the things that people have mentioned this morning are helpful. I popped a couple of things in the chat. I think that involving kind of clinicians would be really important in that. So I put a note to Andrew, because I know Andrew's been having conversations around that as well. So what I'd be grateful for is, if there are specific things that you think should be included and you'd like to see included as part of that event shared, then please, could you let me know? And I'll start to shape up an agenda. And we agreed that it was important to do this well. If we're going to bring the wider system together, we need to do that in quite a kind of structured way. And we also talked about having some potentially some external facilitation, but we need to get that right as well. So let me know if you've got something that you can offer to that conversation.
Excellent, thank you. And volunteers always welcome, aren't they? Great, thanks very much. That was a really useful debate, and thank you for that, Ed. Your ICB board update then developed into a wider debate, which actually I think is also a good sign. Very strong, very positive. Thank you. If there is no more on that item, and I don't see anybody waving, I'm going to move us on to the second matter arising, which stays with you, Ed, the COVID-19 evidence submission. So over to you.
Thank you. So colleagues may remember that during the pandemic, we produced a detailed learning report on our response to COVID. We did that in part to improve and to recognise issues that needed to be addressed. But we also had one eye on the fact that there would be a national inquiry into the COVID response, and so it would be prudent to get ahead of that. So the inquiry is now launched. They've asked all systems to send a return. So Susanna's very helpfully put together the return, I think, that you've got in your papers, and evidences the kind of learning approach that we've taken. So Susanna, do you want to add any more to it?
Thank you, Ed. So just to say that we've sort of directed the inquiry to kind of a wider body of evidence that we worked through at the time. So that's made up of a series of things. So there was the initial system learning review, which we did actually very early on now with the benefit of hindsight. It was done between June and September 2020. That followed on with a further piece of work around kind of how do we heal, some more focused work around equalities, and then some of the learning from how we applied a lot of that learning to the later stages with the vaccination programme as well. So all of that content is available on the ICS website under Get Involved in System Learning. So I just wanted to draw colleagues' attention to it, really, because certainly looking at the questions for the inquiry, as Ed said, I think looking back, the effort that we put in at the time was helpful and actually does capture very much that moment in time in quite a convincing way. So I just want to make colleagues aware of it, because I know the inquiry is also reaching out to other stakeholders in the system, and you might find it useful in terms of framing responses.
Excellent, thank you. Ed, did you want to add any more?
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Thank you. So it is for the today, the action for the ICP today is to receive and note the update. Are there any questions which colleagues would like to raise, or can we simply say received and noted? And no hands raised, so that's what we'll do. Lovely, thanks very much, everybody. In which case, I'll move us on to the next item, which is the Suffolk and North East Essex strategy for approval. And Susanna, I'm going to hand over to you to run this item.
Okay, thank you, Will. So I'm just going to update you. We've been updating you regularly at meetings of the ICP for the last few months on the work to develop our integrated care strategy. But the deadline for us to have in place an initial, and the target was always an initial strategy, was the 31st of December. We met that date very well, but I just want to be clear about where that puts us in terms of kind of progress. So one of the first things that we agreed was that what we didn't want to do, and actually what the guidance around the development of an integrated care strategy gave us the opportunity to do, was that we didn't want to kind of, produce yet another very lengthy document that we frantically sent around to try and kind of get absolutely right on a particular date and then remain fixed over time. But what the new guidance gives us the opportunity to do is to continue to continually iterate and evolve our strategies as we go forward. So given that, we agreed at the outset that we would produce our strategy, instead of making it a document, we would make it a live interactive document, i.e. we'd produce it as a series of web pages. So if you're asking kind of where's our lengthy tome, there isn't one. What you have is a lengthy tome, which is sort of around about, I think it's just over 170 pages, somewhere between 170 and 200 pages worth of web content now, which is on our main ICS website. So what we did on the 31st of December was flipped over to a newly set out website for the ICS, which now basically across all of its sections contains all of the work that we've been doing as a system for some time on strategy. So that's basically where our strategy. So where is our strategy? Basically, what we've done is we've produced a summary document, which you have attached to the papers. That talks you through the kind of main sections of that, which I can walk you through in just a second. And you have seen earlier drafts, certainly at the last meeting. But the other thing that we committed to doing were two really important things. The first is that we committed to using a kind of really good methodology to underpin our strategy. So you'll see that the way that the strategy is structured is based on the outcome-based accountability framework that we've been following for some time. And actually, we took the opportunity of developing this to really clean that up in terms of the way that it's structured. So it brings together kind of all the features of OBA. There's actually a page on the site that kind of talk you through that kind of methodology and all the rest of it. But if you wonder why we've structured it the way we have, where we begin with indicators, outcome measures, that we go on into kind of the story behind the outcome through the lens of not just published evidence, but also very importantly lived experience and wider data, and then going on to setting out ambitions in terms of not specifically what we're going to do, but kind of the principles around, if you like, how we think we can enable improved outcomes. That all comes out of that methodology. So that's the framework for it. We've put onto those pages as much content as we had available by the end of December, and if I'll be absolutely frank, is about as much processing capacity as my little team had the ability to do. And where we got to is we thought, look, once we publish it and all of you see it, I'm sure and I hope that you're all going to look and say, oh, you've missed a case study, you've missed this. We want to include that. That's the point of this. This is a way that we can bring together, if you like, everything that we've each got to offer into the strategy, whether it's lived experience or evidence or measures or case studies or other types of thinking. We want to add it in. And as I said, it is absolutely the case we can continue to evolve it. The other really important commitment that we made at the beginning of the process to develop our integrated care strategy, though, was that we said we really wanted to co-produce and to articulate our strategy through the eyes of the people that we serve, so people living and working in Suffolk and North East Essex. So we used it was quite limited time. We really only had the autumn of this year to do that work. To try to engage with people, as many people as we could, in different ways across Suffolk and North East Essex. We actually engaged with just over at least 600 people in terms of specific contributions that were made through that lens, including in different ways. But one of the ways that we reached out to people was through our inflatable video booth. So what we'd like to do this morning is my colleague Sharon is going to talk through the first paper that we've shared with you this morning, which is just some key messages from our public engagement. And then we do have a short film now, which goes through the different sections of the strategy and includes some clips from members of the public, it really who have set our strategy. You'll see it's the things that they've said, which I know get interpreted in a kind of particular way, but there's nothing like hearing it from the people who've put it forward. So that's what we're intending to do. So if that's okay, Chair.
Susanna, just before you hand over to Sharon, Andrew has raised his hand. Oh, and Shane. So do you mind if I take it to keep the focus on the questions must be on something you've said, if I deal with these questions first? So should I go to Andrew?
Yes, well, thank you, Will, and thank you, Susanna. And I really just wanted to endorse, from the outset, this approach of iteration and dynamism in keeping the strategy continually evolving. And I think absolutely crucial is the involvement of of residents, the public, who are the people we're working for. And I just want to cite the event in Stowmarket, which by accident included members of the wider public who were able to engage and were welcome. And actually, I think it made it really, really effective. So I just wanted to endorse that now.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll take that as agreed with the nods around the table. Thank you very much, though, for raising it. Shane.
Thank you, Chairman. Susanna, this is a fantastic effort in what feels like a relatively short space of time to develop this piece of work, particularly given the number of dimensions and perspectives that you're trying to bring together into one strategy. I think the only bit you've missed out is world peace, which I'm sure there's a tab of under development for that. It's great to see the indicators in here. And that will give us ways of measuring the success of our strategy. The bit that it feels like is missing is in the previous strategy, we not only had indicators, we had goals, ambitions that we attached to those. Are those in development as well?
They are. So where we got to was that we've included in there kind of broadly, if you like, evidence and indicators that's available. But there are sort of two levels of measurement that we can include in this. The first is that we need to be very clear about differentiating between measures, things that measure population outcomes. So we're going to add a couple of measures of population outcomes to the top of, if you like, that order that you'll see on the page. And then further down, some of the things that people have put forward are actually measures of benefits that we might offer to people living in Suffolk and North East Essex, which our hypothesis is that if we deliver this benefit to the population, it will result in improved outcomes. So we do need to differentiate between those two things. So what we're doing at the moment is unpicking that a little bit. We've got an initial kind of list We are a little bit limited by what is regularly collected at present. And so the next stage really is a conversation with all the very clever people, some of whom are on this call, who can start to look at the things that people are saying we need to measure, and look at what capability we've got in the system to measure those things going forward. So there is another stage, to answer your question, Shane, and further work that we need to do. But we did commit at the beginning to saying, let's go and ask people what's most important, and then the measures should follow that, rather than just being framed by what's already collected.
Chairman, may I come back on that?
You may, yes, Shane.
That wasn't really what I was driving at, Susanna. It was more, given that we've identified things to measure and we might add to those in the way that you've said, how much better do we want them to be?
Well, that's the bit where I think we're going to need to get back around a table to have a group of people kind of decide that. So what you're talking about is, we're here at the moment, where do we want to say we're going to be in 3 years' time? Yeah. Absolutely. That's the thing about kind of benchmarking that. So A, the measure, and B, by how much will it improve in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years? And the truth is, Shane, that, well, you know this, I know you know this because you're very good at this stuff, is that the needle will move much more quickly, probably on measures of benefits that we offer rather than outcomes. So,
thank you.
Yeah, good point, Shane. Thank you for raising that. Joan.
Thanks, Will. Just wanted to say, from my perspective, from NHS England, inevitably, all the systems have approached this in a different way, and SNE have, as usual, kind of approached it in a very innovative way. So I think it's a really great piece of work. As you said, Susanna, it's iterative, but the key bit is that, there's that engagement there with people and communities, which is absolutely vitally important. So I look forward to seeing how it iterates over time, but well done, everyone.
Oh, Joan, thank you very much for that feedback. I know that will be appreciated. Thank you. James, and then I must hand back to Susanna, otherwise I'll lose control of the time. Over to you, James.
No, thank you very much indeed. And just could I add my support? And it's a very easy read document, which, I find very useful. Could I just ask a question? And this may be very naive, Susanna, so please forgive me. You've just, following on from Shane's comments about the goals and ambitions, etc., will the dashboards of how those are being measured and the successes we're having come back to this group, or will that be monitored at a different group and reported to us?
No, it would absolutely be through this group. So what I'm hoping is that if you look at the fantastic work that's been done through both public health teams in particular, we've got a lot of data and information now available kind of online. You can kind of click onto kind of graphs and those sorts of things. So there's a bit of a technical job about kind of how we put that kind of data in there, because you can either kind of set a kind of annual update of this, the figure was here, there, and it was there. But I'd always wondered whether it was possible for us to do something, and it might be by asking, say, colleagues in SODA and ECTA if they can include, if you like, an area which then sets up a dashboard, if you like, for those things. But certainly the review of that dashboard and how we're making progress against those population outcomes is the job of the Integrated Care Partnership to look at on a regular basis. The job of looking at some of the measurable benefits, if you like, may also be partly with this group, but I also suspect with other places in the system as well. So I'll give you an example, which is that we have an anchor dashboard, which at the moment is a kind of paper-based thing, a kind of PDF document, but we want to bring that live as well. And actually add a collective delivery around anchors is something which we'll monitor through the ICP. So I think the theme for 2023 on strategies are going to be all about really weaving and leveraging our capability around data and analytics into our strategy, which is why I'm so excited that our starting point now is a document which, an electronic document which is informed by people and communities, but now we can start to kind of lean into saying, well, how can we use our ability to kind of measure that on an ongoing basis? And the other thing, which is just it might sound like a silly thing, but it's important to me, is it's absolutely available to everybody. Anybody can go and have a look at that information. And I think that's a really important kind of principle to follow. And one of the things that we're really committed to doing is just trying to make the language as simple as we can, which is quite hard, but we're carrying on doing it. I keep looking at bits and saying, I wonder if we could state that a bit easier, and you can do that with an electronic document.
Okay, thanks, James. Thanks, Susanna. One quick one from Leighton, and then back to Susanna. Leighton.
Thank you. It's just to follow up on the Ector Soda bit, Susanna. I've been having various conversations with Ector around system sharing of data, and I think they would really like to come, and I'm sure Soda would, to hear, to kind of explain their capabilities and to help us think about how we best maximise it. So something maybe offline, but if you're willing, we can probably get them to come along and do some form of presentation to us, because there's obviously a lot more that we can utilise from them to help inform us.
We know colleagues in both, Leighton, and a big kind of agenda has been about kind of linking data, hasn't it? About linking data and through sort of PHM. But I think maybe, Chair, what's being suggested is an item in a couple of months' time to look specifically at the data and measures aspects of the strategy. And certainly, Leighton absolutely would need that support from Ector and Data Soda to do that.
Excellent. Okay, and that very much plays into that earlier discussion we had about good quality, high quality data. So, yeah, should we take that as an action as well? Good. Thanks very much, all. Susanna, I'm handing back to you now for what you planned.
So what we want to do now is to go through. Sharon's just going to talk a little bit about. Sharon led the work alongside. Can we just thank Healthwatch? Both Healthwatch Suffolk and Essex, who were just brilliant at supporting this process, and I have to say have exemplified what's set out in the Health and Care Act about that independent role, but working and supporting the ICP. Healthwatch Essex, we had a member of their team who worked with us to help to review all of the content that came back. But Sharon, you kind of led on that, and you've amazingly, I can't quite believe it, actually summarised 2 sides of paper, which was my target of the sorts of things people say, and then I'll show the film.
Lovely, thank you. So yes, absolutely. Thank you to everybody who contributed to all of it, really. People in the system, the Healthwatch, the public, people who use services, everybody. So it was really great and difficult to draw the themes together, but there were some key themes that came out. So obviously a lot of that is in the strategy, so and you can go on the website and look at that, so I'm not repeating that stuff. The paper really is about some of those overarching common themes, and you've got the paper, so I won't dwell on it in huge detail, but just to pull out some of the things. Access was the single most important thing. Access to information, access to services, diagnosis, care, treatment, support was really important to people, and actually there were some really good ideas that came out from people. That I think was the thing. If I look at an overarching thing, people have thought about health and care services, and they've thought about the ideas and the things that they want from them. But they talked about, local access, pop-ups, direct access, single points of access, and the non-traditional settings as well, not just sticking to health and care settings, but things like libraries and so on, which we know are used a bit. People want more of that. The single biggest issue, and I reckon probably 70–80% of people talked about GPs, which is understandable, because if you're not well, you need to go to your GP urgently. If you think there's something more serious, then GPs are the way of accessing that diagnosis and then forwards onto treatment. People, some people had difficulties registering, people had difficulties with appointments. They really value those face-to-face appointments. People talked about being, can you diagnose me over the phone? Can you do my diabetes asthma review over the phone? There was a lot of nervousness about that. And then I think there's a misunderstanding, resistant to explaining their healthcare problems in detail from somebody they perceived as not medically trained. So that is an important thing, right or wrong. That's a perception of people that's important to listen to. However, the other thing I think that was a concern was also that where surgeries used a lot of locums, people felt they were getting slightly different advice or service from different doctors. But I think what was important was that people are valuing their GPs, and particularly they want their GPs to help advocate for them in their contacts with secondary care and to support them. And they also wanted more involvement of GPs in prevention, which is interesting. Access to urgent emergency care, again, predictably, it's all over the press all the time around access to ambulances, access to emergency care, people worrying about having to get to A&E on their own steam when they have difficulty with public transport or getting a lift or whatever, and some people are clearly going to A&E because they feel they can't get an appointment with a GP and they want to see somebody. So that is something, obviously, I know we're addressing. But one way of resolving that was to think about more urgent treatment centres locally and 24/7 as well. People talked about the waits. They found waits for care stressful, that it was worsening their health, but they wanted help to stay well and to recover after a crisis. I recognise there's an awful lot happening, but obviously that's a major concern of people. People wanted their workforce, the health and care workforce, to be can-do, which is a lot of our website. They wanted individual staff to listen, respond, to communicate with each other and with them. They want people to be caring. They want the right information. They want carers, formal and informal carers, to be supported. And they want, obviously, to get home when they need to get home from hospital. And they don't want to fall between the eligibility gaps as well around services. There was some information about that came through about equalities, and that's particularly about individuality. Recognise my individuality. Don't assume what's wrong with me based on my diagnosis and so on. Ultimately, though, I think there are two key issues. One is a lot of people, and this comes up in the press and on all sorts of places, people feel that the system, they describe the system or bits of the system as broken. They feel that the services, health and care services, are underfunded, people are underpaid and staff are undervalued. They see the use of private hospitals and the use and the private sector care homes as losing profits out of the system. You can argue the rights or wrongs of that or the accuracy of that, but clearly that's a perception that's important to recognise. However, despite that, everyone, I think the unifying factor is that everyone is committed to the best health and care themselves and their families. They want to support health and care services. If we'd have done this 5 years ago, I don't think we would have seen that same sensitivity and that will to support the services and the staff who provide them. And they really want to uphold those values about quality, about patient-centeredness, about respect, compassion, and so on. So ultimately, although there were lots of things that we need to work on, I think actually it was a positive exercise because it reinforced how important people feel that health and care is. So as Susanna mentioned, there is a film which summarises some of those messages through our pop-up video booth, linked to particular areas of the strategy. Not sure. Oh, Susanna's sharing that. I'll let it speak for itself.
And I think there should be some more joined up thinking between the two, social care and health. At the moment, I do have support from MND nurses and consultants and community services such as occupational therapists and physios, but whilst they might liaise with each other, they don't always copy me in, so I don't know who's done what and what's happening. That's the thing I find most frustrating, having to constantly chase up whether it's equipment or response to something and whatever. At the moment, I've got a very difficult health condition I'm trying to come to terms with, and which is bad enough without other stressful situations which I don't think should be there.
I think what we need to think differently is to think of impacting the community and the society. So many people are struggling because of isolation, rejection, loneliness. So if we can impact the community by giving them funds to do things, a lot of social kind of services there, where people can go for teas and coffees, for interaction and all those things, we will reduce the number of people that we are admitting in hospital.
I think we could be thinking about building more resilience in our communities, more resilience individually, so thinking more about healthcare, how we look after our own health, how we take care of ourselves from going to the pharmacy rather than looking to always access a GP or out of hours or go to the hospital, and thinking more, how can I build my own resilience for myself and my family?
Sometimes you don't get, because you're autistic,
yeah,
and you've got things under autism,
yes,
you find that you don't always get the help that you need.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And support that you need, especially in school with your schoolwork and that.
Yeah.
Yeah?
They should help people more. We should think differently to the people that are different, maybe look different, sound different, or in any different way, because everyone is different in their own kind.
When we are identifying care for a group of people, we should ask them about cultural intelligence, how they want to be treated, what sort of beliefs they have in terms of that treatment, because we as clinicians are missing that, and that needs to be respected. Everyone needs to be treated equally in the NHS, whether it's staff, patients. I think if we treat everyone equally, we will get it right, and we will improve in terms of our health outcomes. So I think we need to respect each other, trust each other, work together, and love one another.
My son having autism, the SEN and healthcare don't coincide very well. They don't communicate. Our paediatrician has been amazing at the beginning, but because he isn't an emergency case, we haven't had a review in since before COVID, and because they're backlogged with the waiting list, because there's not enough of them. When I was young, I remember a lot of stuff being done through the schools, like the dentist, the eyes and all that seems to have stopped as well. So that's something that could help parents.
My son's just started reception and he was able to have access to a flu vaccine at school. So if there are other ways that we can access things within the local community rather than having to kind of make appointments and queue up at the GPs, and they're obviously overworked and overstretched.
One of the areas that I believe is a real challenge for us at the moment is around dentistry care and the ability to access NHS services. Not everyone can afford to go privately, and that's having a big impact on both young people, children and the elderly across the area.
They should listen to people who have incurable diseases. In fact, they should listen to people in more detail rather than just dismiss them. When I was diagnosed, it took a year and a half to get diagnosed because I kept getting dismissed by the doctor. As it's just in your mind, it's a temporary thing, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until I kept going back that they decided to start putting me through 1,000,001 tests, which I get have to be done. And I was diagnosed with MS. So that's really about it. It's just about communication and listening and acting where they can.
I suffer with anxiety, PTSD and depression. Coming from a mental health view, I think the NHS should understand how to come across to a mental health patient a bit more curiosity, and they should be thinking a little bit more differently than thinking it's your mental health that's causing certain problems when it could be something else, and they should kind of care a little bit more about people who are struggling.
Young black men, they hold things in. They hold things in and they need to talk and let it out, but they think they're going to be judged. It's like it's a taboo thing, but really needs to be looked into. Maybe if there was more people of colour that was dealing with the mental health issues with black men or black youngsters, more role models, this situation will be lesser, because a lot of people don't come forward and ask, and help is there. It's so sad to lose a life.
Being independent, having that ability to continue to be independent in your own home, and to not stay in hospital for longer than you need to, so you're not vulnerable. So, for example, with my mum, she's got me to help her at home, but there's a lot of people which don't have that. So if they had the home help available to them, it's good for keep them independent, but also takes them out of an environment they don't need to be in. You agree?
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think if you're completely disabled or partially disabled, it's nice for somebody to come in and say, I'll take you out to the shops just to have a look around, or a bit of fresh air.
I lost my little brother. He unfortunately passed away when I was 19 to a illness called muscular dystrophy, and he had really great end-of-life care. So I just want my other family members and my close friends to have the type of care and support that he had if they ever need it.
It becomes very easy for health professionals to talk over you as if you don't exist and as if you're not there or not even in the room, because they're used to their job, they know what they're doing, but they must never forget to explain what they're doing, what you're having done, and why you're having it done. So just to remember that you're an individual and that you're a person, and that actually you're very frightened. And although that's their day job and they've been doing it for years, it's very new to you. You might never have been in hospital before. I've had people to hold my hand when I've been absolutely terrified. And without them doing that, I would not have got through the experiences that I've had.
Care and well-being is more than just the rudiments of healthcare. It's about people caring, people doing the extra mile, people walking the extra mile with you, and also people not giving up on you, even when you're ready to give up on yourself. And I think what matters is the fact that the NHS is such a wonderful organisation, and the people in it are what make it. It's the people that serve everybody every day that make it. And it's the people that care and go that extra mile that make all of us who've had cancer and had healthcare problems want to go on.
So hopefully you found that inspiring. Can I just say that it was really difficult just to choose the ones that we did, but hopefully they illustrate our strategy very well. I'm not going to go through our strategy in detail. You've got a copy of the summary document there, but you'll find the detail that sits underneath everything that's stated in this summary now on our website. So everything from how we come together as an integrated care system, how we work across Suffolk and across Essex, links to the work that we've already done about how we work as an integrated care system, particularly through our 3 local alliances and also neighbourhoods. It does go through those 4 kind of collective ambitions, which are, to be honest, just to sort of shorthand, are really about prevention, health inequalities, providing care and support to people at every stage of life, and not just to in response to illness, but to supporting health and wellbeing and being that genuinely kind of can-do health and care system that we want. It also talks about kind of, the parity that's really, really important around our ICS, around the 5 different sectors and those values. So what you've got there is a summary of that through the words of hopefully people who we serve, and also a very high level summary of our ambition, which is strategic. And then, as I said, the detail then underpinning that is on our website. So that's everything from us, Will. And thank you for the time this morning to share some of the feedback from the engagement.
Thank you, Susanna, and thank you, team, for all that work, which has been done so promptly as well. And as others have said, terrific engagement. Thank you very much. And some hard-hitting, hard-hitting, is that the right phrase? Some very impactful points made by members of the public there, which I know the ICP members around the table today have appreciated. So thank you for that. So open for questions or points. Ed, over to you.
Just firstly, just to pay tribute to Susanna and team and everyone involved in constructing the strategy, which I think is first class and very impressive. The lived experience videos were great, and I think just reflecting back on the commitment we made at the start around a summit, you can almost, the lived experience almost sets the agenda for that summit, I would say. And then the third thing I wanted to make is that primary care, obviously a lot of scrutiny and comment, but it is arguably our biggest asset in the system. We have wonderful primary care. Improvements to be made, of course, but I just wanted to balance that too, that there's it is an incredible asset that we have, and we have to support and develop it too.
Marvellous. Thank you, Ed. Good points and well made. Let me go first to Peter, then I'll go to Sharon. So Peter, all yours.
Thanks, Will. So, look, just a couple of reflections. I think a lot of what Sharon talked about would be recognised by GPs as what they want to deliver to. So we want to deliver continuity of care. We want to be able to spend time with our patients. We want to do the preventative work and give the decent access. So I don't think you'd find a huge amount of disagreement. There might be some to and fro about the face-to-face bit, but by and large, we want the same as what you would want. And I think the other reflection I would have is that a lot of this is not necessarily new. I think we've probably been talking about these sorts of aspirations in various guises for many years. So then the question is, well, what has stopped us delivering it up until now? Because clearly there's still quite a lot of work to do. And I just wonder whether that's the question we need to be asking. And not wishing to prejudge that piece of work, but I would suggest that a lack of capacity in the system has meant that we haven't created the environment to facilitate those outcomes that everybody wants. So that's just a few thoughts.
Very useful, and again plays into the point, Peter, doesn't it, that Ed made about the importance of the summit to which we've now committed as a partnership. Okay, thank you for that, Sharon.
Thanks, Will. Absolutely rich resource of feedback from the community and the public, which I know Susanna and team and Sharon are going to put to good use in, I would hope, redesigning the system, because, I was watching a documentary the other night about, or was it last night actually, about the hospitals being overwhelmed, which we all know, but it seems that there are people who are well and ready to be discharged, but it's that blocking up of the community that's keeping them in hospital. And my reflection is that we have got all the necessary facilities in place. We just need to redesign it all, because we're working in a system that's been going on for decades, but we've got to change society now. The emphasis is on keeping well and prevention. And just anecdotal feedback from some of the people that use CVST services is that they are more than appreciative and satisfied of the NHS when they are in the treatment role mode. When they're actually getting treatment, when they're actually going through surgery, when they're in that top tier, they can't praise the NHS enough, and they are so thankful that we have the NHS at our fingertips. It's just, lower down the levels and the tiers that I think we all know that we need to look at that, and that's the purpose of all this consultation. And I just wanted to give praise where it was due.
Thanks, Sharon. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, the actual item, of course, is the SNE strategy, and you are requested to approve it if you're so minded today. We've had a very rich discussion. I think we've appreciated the messages that we've received from the public engagement, and more importantly than anything else, not only have we heard those messages, but we've listened, and that's really, really important, isn't it? We've reflected on the importance of the upcoming summit to which we've committed. We understand and acknowledge the point around outcomes and milestones, and recognising that any good strategy is iterative, is dynamic, and will not be fixed in tablets of stone in perpetuity. But where we are today, you're asked to approve the strategy as presented, and unless I see anybody shaking their heads or hands raised in objection, I'm hoping that we can perhaps take it as unanimously approved with those comments that I've just summarised. Everything, is that a thumbs up from Andrew? Yeah, it is. Good. Thank you very much. I don't see anybody objecting. Shall we take that as unanimously approved? Agreed. Thank you very, very much, all, and thanks again for all the work in getting us to this position. And I'm sure it won't be the last time we talk about strategy. In fact, I very much hope it isn't. So I'm going to move us on. You're doing incredibly well. We are dead on time. In fact, possibly 1 minute ahead. And I'm going to go to Richard for the joint forward plan presentation. Richard, we're going to you 1 minute ahead, but you are between us and a tea break. So
no pressure.
10 minutes, it's all yours.
No pressure, thank you. So I'm just here this morning just to talk a little bit about the process that we're going through in developing the joint forward plan. So colleagues hopefully have had a chance to look through this slide. I have got a couple of updates that I will talk to. As you can imagine, this is a bit of a moving feast as the guidance came out, I think, on Christmas Eve, and there's further work that's come out since then. So very briefly, by way of background, each of the 42 ICBs that in England have got to develop a 5-year joint forward plan. So effectively setting out, as a local ICB, our contribution to the achievement of the ICS strategy and the local health and wellbeing board strategies. We've embarked on this work, and the aim is to get to a robust position by the end of March, but the guidance does state we could go to the end of June. That's a change from what we were originally anticipating, but at the moment we're aspiring for the end of March to achieve a version that we can take to the ICB board. Susanna and I have been working, as always, hand in glove through the strategy into the JFP for our contribution, as I said, towards ICS strategy achievement. And that starts with the vision and the outcomes that we are suggesting that we put at the heart of the JFP. So I'll not read it out, but the vision is basically correlating with our SNE ICS strategy vision. And we're absolutely adopting the 6 domains of the Live Well model, starting with Start Well through to Die Well, which is well embedded in North East Essex, and both of our 2 Suffolk alliances have also now agreed to adopt. So we've got a common methodology, which is brilliant across the ICS within our 3 alliances. Similarly, again, to the work on the strategy, in terms of each of those 6 live well domains, the next slide takes you through the breakdown of the major areas of focus. So this is not exhaustive. This is the latest list that we're looking to develop. You'll see under each of these that we're following the OBA methodology that we've all embraced. In terms of first for each of those subsections, take maternity, for instance, we're going to look at why is it important for the people of SNE? What do we know about people's local experiences? So as Sharon eloquently talked earlier, and also the video, we're getting lots of information through from that. How do we plan to make a difference, which is the key part of this document? What are the key actions and priorities that we're committing to over the 5 years? How will we know we've made a difference? So what are the outcomes, so the sub-outcomes and the KPIs? And then a case study where possible on each of the areas of focus. I'll not take you through, Will, the next two. It's just there for info in terms of the contents page. Again, it's tweaking now and again, but broadly, we're comfortable at this stage with how we're going to set out the sections of the document. I've added this just to talk a little bit more about the engagement approach, because we've been talking further about this since the original slides were sent out. So we've been engaging with a range of partners and stakeholders in the drafting of the document for the last 4 to 6 weeks, many of you on the call today. We do have a very first draft, first cut, and I'm afraid it is a bit of a tome of a document, to use Susanna's phrase, given the nature of what we have to include, including the guidance that came out on Christmas Eve. What we're aiming to do in terms of then further engagement on that document is we're going through a series of meetings, including today in January and February. We're looking to launch on our Let's Talk SNE web platform for wider engagement from around Monday and Tuesday next week. So we've got a kind of a cut down version of the key live well domain sections, but we're also looking to, and it is a draft, I have to say, publish the draft version on the 27th of January, so that we've got about a month for much wider engagement on the content. Rather than kind of waiting to the end point, we're going out with a draft to obviously get as much feedback as we possibly can on it. We'll then be aiming to effectively get to a point around the 24th of February where we've got a robust draft that we can start going through some of the sign-off mechanisms that we need to take the plan through. I won't go through all the next steps, but I'll just pick out a few if that's okay, Will, because some of this has changed literally in the last couple of days. So as I said, we're aiming to launch next week the Let's Talk SNE platform, and we're also looking to have an engagement event with each of our 3 local alliances. We're just sorting out the dates. Our engagement team is probably in early mid-February. We're going to a variety of forums, so this is not an exhaustive list, but it includes our 3 alliances, and hopefully, if it's okay with the chairs, the ICP, again, coming back in March with a bit more content once we've got that in place. Our aspirations, as I said earlier, Will, is to take this to the ICB board for final sign-off on the 21st of March at our meeting. I've also had a dialogue with the committee secretariat of the 2 health and wellbeing boards and the DPHs, and also my colleagues who are leading on this in our neighbouring ICBs. The general consensus is that there is a preference, particularly from my neighbouring ICB colleagues, to take the final version to the May meetings of the health and wellbeing boards, because the March early meetings, some of our colleagues won't necessarily be quite ready to take the final version. And we felt it was important that we come together rather than in a piecemeal fashion with each ICB coming separately. So as it stands, we're talking around May for the health and wellbeing boards, which is a key stakeholder groups. And then I've deliberately put an asterisk on publication because we're seeking some more guidance on whether we wait until it's gone to the health and wellbeing boards before we formally publish. So I'll be able to update the ICP at our next meeting around that. So, well, I hope that's a very quick canter, and I'm in my 10 minutes, but effectively it's just a heads up really around the process we've got underway. And I'll make sure the link where you've got it, the Let's Talk SNE website, you'll start to see the content of that as it's iterated through. And I'm more than happy to come with the team to any of your individual meetings or boards, etc., as we continue to iterate the content.
Richard, that's really helpful update. Thank you very, very much. Could I, may I go to Peter? Peter, you've got a question about cross-cutting domains and so on. Do you want to make that point?
Yeah, I appreciate this is really about content, and there's further consultation, and perhaps this is best reserved for that. But there are a number of domains which I think primary care, public health, a number of sectors cut right across all of them. I just wondered if we should reflect that in the slides in the document.
Well, yes, absolutely. Just to be clear, it's not that, say, that we have a mental health subdomain under Feel Well, that only the mental health teams will look at that. Equally, primary care cuts across, as does our VCSE partners. So what I would say is all partners are more than welcome to engage and input into all the sections. You don't need to stick to your specific sector, if I can put it like that. So it's not written in that way.
Okay, thank you. And then let me go to Ed and then Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard. So it's just on the positioning of this. So we've had the ICP strategy introduced by Susanna. The joint forward plan is the ICB's response to it. So it's only one partner's response within the system. It could be that, you know, councils, universities, whatever, may have their own responses. So this is a whole system response. This is the kind of the NHS response. The other thing I want to say is that, yes, we've got a tome of around 250 pages, growing rapidly. But what I'm keen to see, and Richard and I are talking about, is to bring out some, maybe, you know, 10 big ideas, because there'll be lots of things we want to do. But if we could boil it down to some really clear, ambitious, very bold, even radical big ideas, because we cannot continue as we are for all the reasons we've heard from the public today. So out of each of the areas, I'm looking for some of those innovations. To support that, the Prime Minister, as we read in the papers, held I can't remember how it was described, but let's call them recovery discussions of the NHS on Saturday. And there were 4 sessions, only a very small handful of people attended, but we had Nick Hume was invited in the elective care session, and Neil Macy, who's a doctor at Stowe Health in Suffolk, was in the primary care session. He was the only jobbing GP there. So we have, through Nick and Neil, a real opportunity to influence national thinking and policy as this work develops. So we've got a window, I think, to come up with some really impactful, bold ideas that we can maybe connect into government too. So it's a very exciting time, but we've got to really nail this very well in the next couple of months. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ed. Let me go to Mark and then Susanna, and then we'll try and wrap. All yours, Mark.
Thank you. I was just wondering, the Health Economic Unit have been quite active recently and come to the Directors of Finance, and whether we can look at a health system economic approach to how the forward plan takes the strategy and makes it a reality. And it may then help with that cross-cutting piece that Peter Smy's been suggesting. You know, we have lots of different elements that go towards single outcomes, and I have proposed something around falls, particularly in older people, as it is the major driver in Ipswich and East Suffolk, and if we could take a health economic approach to this, we could have a really radical change in how we do the resource allocation, so that we move from high cost to high value returns on investment. I'm just wondering whether we'll be looking at that as part of this forward plan. Thank you.
Richard, do you want to comment?
I'll have to talk to you more, Mark, to fully understand it. I'm not going to make up and profess I understand exactly what you mean. So if you and I can talk separately, that would be really, really helpful. And Ed, I did forget the killer line, as you just said. So yes, we're looking for around 10, and I'm making 10 up, as you said, key commitments, and that will also be a feature of the engagement work that we're starting next week. So actually, we're on the back of it, as you said, a myriad massive document, cutting to what do people feel are the absolute key things that we should be driving forward. Because by the nature, as you said, of the document, it's going to be a tome of a document, but we want a really clear, succinct exec summary with the top X things that the ICB board is going to be held accountable for and hold itself accountable for over the next 5 years. I'm very confident we'll get a huge list, and then we need to figure out a process for distilling that down into something that is a manageable number.
Okay, thanks, Richard, and we'll take that as an outside the meeting action between Mark and Richard. Thank you, and then Susanna.
Yeah, sorry, I can't use my hands up function for some reason. So two things really. I mean, one is, Richard, you and I know this well, that now, well, you've got a slightly extended time frame, which is helpful. And now that we've got the kind of strategy, we can do more work to make sure that the two things are aligned. I think it's really important that we don't end up duplicating, and that, if you like, being awkward, we need to make sure that the dovetailing works. And you can absolutely draw on, obviously, what we've drawn out of the public engagement is the points that were kind of more strategic, if you like, and they illustrate a lot of the points, but there's a lot of content in what we've gathered already, which equally could inform the JFP. So that's really important. And the other thing, and this is really kind of key, is that having set out, we've set out the strategy, the live well domains are part of the strategy, but really important in the strategy, it makes the really key points around the importance around prevention, health equality, and also that what came through very, very strongly in the engagement was people wanting that can-do health and care response. So, we've begun talking about that around culture really as well. So I think it's really important to make sure that those are included in the JFP, as well as kind of key areas. And obviously we're going to talk a bit in a little while about kind of prevention and equality, as we've been working on that, but we need to make sure that they're as well as the live well domains.
That's part. I think Susanna, as we've discussed before, and I've said yes, they're absolutely included within there. So I'm not concerned about that, but happy to talk to you further.
Thanks, Susanna and Richard. So, colleagues, with a new three-letter acronym in Mark's lexicon, and I see two hands raised as well. Andrew and then James. So, Andrew.
Yes, thanks, Will. Just to say, I put it in the chat. I'm very interested to learn what the outcome of the conversation between Mark and Richard is in terms of his concept, what he's mentioning around the economy aspect.
We'll take a feedback on that. Either perhaps we can do that electronically, Susanna, because time, we don't want to wait 2 months for that feedback, do we? I'm sure Andrew wouldn't. So perhaps Richard, Mark, when you've had that debate, if you pop something over to Susanna, you'd pop it out to ICP members, Susanna. That'd be helpful. Yeah, thank you. And James?
Yeah, just very, very quickly, thank you. I absolutely approve of the can-do attitude. I mean, that's absolutely up and centre. But as some colleagues will have heard me say before, there's got to be a will-do attitude. There are lots of people that can, but will they? And I'm suggesting a lot of the reason of why they can't do it or don't do it is because they do not have the authority to actually do something that makes a difference. So I think the whole cultural part is to empower people to be able, who are qualified and have the correct resources, to actually make decisions that affect an output, rather than having to ask permission to do something higher up. So I just add that as a public servant. Thank you.
Yeah, no, good point. So it can not only can do, but will do. And actually, James, wouldn't it be great to be able to then look back in a few months and years' time and said, did do? Because that, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so thank you, colleagues. We're asked, this is only an update. I think we've received and noted it. We agree with the timeline, as we note the point that Richard's made in the timeline, and that there is a degree of uncertainty still around the final endpoint. Richard has also implored colleagues to take this information out to engage for engagement to your own organisations. So particularly John and Andrew as well, if you could prompt the health and wellbeing boards about their ability and the desire that we have that they engage with this process, that would be great. So received and noted. Thank you very much, Richard. Colleagues, 5 to 11. What I suggest we do now is take a 10-minute break. Cameras off and microphones off, and we'll reconvene at 11:05 with Kirsten and Alistair on the resilience paper for the VCFE sector. Okay, thanks all.